October 9th, 2023 marks the 200th anniversary of the birth of an important woman in American and Canadian history. On that date in 1823, Mary Ann Shadd Cary was born. Who was Mary Ann Shadd Cary, and why was she important? In the early to mid-1800s, the system of slavery existed in the United States. Enslaved African Americans did not have control over their own lives. They were owned by people who forced them to work in hard, back-breaking jobs for no pay. They did not have the right to make decisions about their own families, and often wives, husbands, children, and other family members were sold to someone else and taken far away. There was nothing the enslaved person could do about it. Enslaved people were not allowed to attend school or learn how to read and write. Sometimes they were not even fed properly and were beaten for minor violations. Great Britain abolished slavery by 1834, which meant that slavery could no longer exist in Canada. Women did not have the right to vote or run for political office in Canada or the United States. Women were expected to get married and take care of the home and the children. Mary Ann Shadd lived during this time in history. In 1850, the Fugitive Slave Act was passed by the U.S. Congress. This meant that enslaved people who had escaped and were living in northern states where slavery had already been abolished, these people could be tracked down and captured much more easily and taken back to slavery. It didn't matter if the person was enslaved or free. What would you do if you were a free person living during that time? Mary Ann Shadd was born on October 9th, 2023, into a family of free Blacks in Wilmington, Delaware, then a slave state. Mary Ann's parents were abolitionists, meaning that they fought against slavery. One of the ways they did this was by hiding escaped slaves in their home, feeding and caring for them, and then sending them further north and to Canada to live in freedom. Mary Ann grew up understanding the importance of the struggle to end slavery. There were no schools that Black children were allowed to attend in Wilmington, Delaware when she was a child, so Mary Ann's parents moved the family to Pennsylvania, where they attended school. When she was 16 years old, Mary Ann went back to Wilmington and opened a school for Black children. Over the next 10 years, she went on to teach in a number of schools in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and in New York City. In 1851, Mary Ann Shadd moved to Canada and established a racially integrated school in Windsor, Ontario, where students of all races could attend. She also became involved in community affairs, but her views opposed some important leaders in the community, such as Black abolitionists Henry Bibb and his wife Mary Bibb, publishers of the Voice of the Fugitive newspaper. 2 years later, Shadd School closed when the organization that was financing it withdrew its support because of her outspoken views. Mary Ann started her own newspaper called the Provincial Freeman, and asked Black abolitionist Samuel Ringgold Ward to be the editor. At first, Mary Ann Shadd would not put her name as an editor because she feared a paper run by a female publisher and editor would not be taken seriously. However, in reality, she was the publisher, she was the editor, and the money manager of the newspaper. She wrote articles and engaged in investigative journalism. The Provincial Freeman wrote about the evils of slavery and also promoted Canada as the best place for Black people in America, enslaved or free, to settle. Shadd believed that society should be integrated, meaning that schools, churches, and other institutions should not be separated into some for Black people and others for white people. The paper also wrote about racism in Canada. The motto of the Provincial Freeman was, "Self-reliance is the true road to independence." To promote the paper, Mary Ann Shadd toured around the province and in the northern United States and gave speeches against slavery and in support of Black people moving to Canada. At the same time, she used the opportunity to sell subscriptions to the newspaper. Mary Ann married Thomas Carey, a Toronto businessman, and had 2 children, Sarah and Linton. Sadly, Thomas died after only 4 years. In 1861, Civil War in America broke out. Mary Ann Shadd was one of perhaps 2 Black women who were hired to recruit Black soldiers to fight in the Civil War. Harriet Tubman was another one. Then a remarkable thing happened. President Lincoln freed all Black people who were enslaved. Black people all over the United States and Canada rejoiced. Some Black people in Canada returned to the United States to help the newly freed people transition to freedom. Those with teaching skills, for example, were needed to teach newly freed people how to read and write. Mary Ann Shadd Cary was one of these people who returned, and she eventually moved to Washington, D.C. Mary Ann Shadd Cary did not stop there. She became the first Black woman to enroll in law school at Howard University, and the second Black woman to graduate and become a lawyer in the United States. In 1871, Black men had gained the franchise or the right to vote the previous year, in 1870, but women in the United States were still not allowed to vote. Nevertheless, Mary Ann Shadd attempted to register as a voter in Washington, D.C., but was turned away. It wasn't until 1918 that most women in Canada won the right to vote, and in the United States, this happened in 1919. Mary Ann Shadd Cary practiced law and continued to fight for equality for Black people and for the rights of women for the rest of her life. She died at the age of 70 in 1893. So what was Mary Ann Shadd Cary's legacy? Why did she matter? As a journalist, Mary Ann Shadd Cary broke ground as the first Black woman to publish and edit a newspaper in North America, and she was one of the earliest women to do so in Canada. As a journalist, she sought not only to report the news, but to change society, and she continues to inspire Black journalists in Canada to this day. Mary Ann Shadd Cary was a role model for women who wanted to do things in the world, be a newspaper editor, teach in a school, publish articles, pamphlets, and books, become a doctor or lawyer, or speak in public. Women were frowned upon for doing any of those things during the time that she lived, and so she has inspired generations of women to fight for equality. Mary Ann Shadd Cary left a legacy in the Provincial Freeman newspaper that she published. Historians and researchers can read her newspaper and learn about the Black communities in Canada and in the United States and the issues they faced in the mid-1800s. The Provincial Freeman is an important source of information on Black life in Canada in that time period. As a member of the Shadd family myself and Mary Ann's great-great-great-niece, I have been inspired to want to learn more about Black Canadian history and about the many ways that Black men and women have contributed and helped shape this country. Happy 200th birthday, Aunt Mary Ann!